One, two, three. Hello. Welcome, everybody, to Kabarett. I'm Dan Bannis. With me is my personal dog friend, Good Boy.
What's going on, everyone? I'm everyone's favorite dog friend. I love that.
I mean, dogs are good friends in general,
Oh man,
So,
it works so well for me.
yeah, good. How has your week been?
Busy but good. Can't complain.
Nice.
How about you?
Yeah,
How about you, Dan?
pretty much the same. Yeah. Uh, Still getting accustomed to the new place and everything, but yeah, can't complain. That's for sure. So cool. Let's dive into this week's stories that we wanted to cover. So this is a fairly old one, actually, that still is not going away. I guess both of them are kind of along those lines. So a couple weeks ago in Chicago, this guy from the show Empire um, was allegedly the victim of an attack. However, he very quickly it became clear that it probably didn't happen because of the way that he described the attack. Anyone who's been following kind of the news and hysterical stories, for example, the Covington kids, or during the 2016 election cycle, there were many examples of like hate crimes alleged that you would look into the story a day or two later, and almost time after time, they would be almost immediately debunked. Where it's like, oh, the guy did it to himself or what have you. And it's unfortunate because, I think it's obvious that, hate crimes happen, and America has a lot of violence for being such a wealthy nation. But I'm of the opinion that hoaxes seem to be on the rise, and this one in particular just had all the hallmarks of a hoax.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I definitely agree with that assessment. That's like, sure, uh, no one here is gonna ever deny the fact that attacks occur, and a lot of times they are motivated out of hatred for some, attribute of a person that they have no control over: their sex, their race, their religion.
Mm-hmm.
Um, you know, and but it is interesting, and I think it is hard to doubt
Yeah.
that we are also seeing a rise of false false reported hate crimes.
Mm-hmm.
False reported hate crimes.
Yes, and then I would say false news is a bigger issue than hate crimes in America today. A further reaching one that is having a more damaging effect on our climate and culture. I mean, most people that I know are not super interested in race. However, everyone seems to be interested and frustrated by a shabby media, whether it's people complaining about Fox News, where I'm from, and in LA, and probably where you're from in New York, or anywhere else in the country, complaining about the many left leaning sites that are at least as bad, if not these days often worse than Fox News, which is pretty shocking.
What do you mean, like the New York Times, like a
Like the New
reputable,
York
like a
Times.
like a used to be a reputable like news organization?
Yeah.
Like
Well,
that was like the
yeah.
go-to when you wanted to talk about like where real news came from. You're like, well,
Hmm.
it's not like it was printed in the New York Times.
I need to double check this, but I believe the New York Times is currently owned by the guy who ran the BBC at the time of the Jimmy Savile cover up. I'm not completely certain of that, but I'm pretty certain that's true. There is some sort of connection there, but we should
Interesting.
look into that further, because it's the sort of thing that wouldn't surprise me, because they just seem so much more interested in evading news than they do with reporting news,
You know,
which, as you can imagine, is a problem.
yeah, I would say that in many ways, the 20th century is characterized in many ways, again, by being like post-religious. Like this is like the century that stretched beyond religion, where the
Mhm.
church wasn't calling shots. It was governments, like massive governments that were just, really calling the shots. I mean, whether it was communist, USSR or China, or, just East versus West. We're talking about the Nazis in Germany. I mean,
Mhm.
massive governments were really calling the shots in this
Yeah.
post-religious world of the 20th century. I think we're entering a period of time in because of the internet, a consequence of the internet is that everyone has a recording device, sound and audio on them at all times. And
Mhm.
we are moving into a period where the news isn't necessary anymore. We are learning about what is happening in the world in real time.
Mhm.
And because of that, organizations like, the Washington Post, the New York Times, any news
Mhm.
organization is now in the age of the internet plus what, 20. Like, I mean, we are 20 years deep into the internet in and we're really starting to see the consequences of this invention. I mean, I don't think the news is going to exist in the manner in which it used to,
Mm.
because we've kind of evolved past that. It's they're
Yeah,
the
well,
buggy whip makers of their time in many ways, and
mhm.
either now they've been forced into this situation where in a market economy, you got to sell those papers, you got to get those clicks, and now they just have to kind of make sensationalized news constantly, constantly, and they have to run with
Well,
it.
it's interesting. Yeah, because it's like in the moment we're in now, it's like we're not even in the post news world anymore, which I would say is like the kind of Fox News sensationalism and then CNN sensationalism, and then the internet like Vice sensationalism, BuzzFeed sensationalism. We are now in the, so I would say that was the post news era. We're now in the post news era where even the fake news is irrelevant and unable to survive.
Hmm.
So this happened a week or two ago. BuzzFeed, I think 2 weeks ago now, BuzzFeed laid off a huge chunk of their staff. HuffPo laid off their entire editorial staff. CNN's been making kind of rolling layoffs. Vice News laid off, I think, about 10% of their staff recently. All of these outlets are dying out, and they're not even they're not even real news, is quote unquote. They're supposed to be like the hot, fresh new shocking news that gets all the clicks, but they ain't getting all the clicks anymore.
No,
Um,
they've been bloated for a while too, right? They saw
they've been
their
bloated for a while.
Yeah,
Yes.
for sure. And if you're
So,
in,
mhm,
even if you're in a place like CNN and you're talking about layoffs, if you scroll back up, I mean,
mhm.
if your name is Tom Clutt and you wrote a piece with Anne Fung,
Right.
Anne's probably looking at you going, you know, don't get too comfortable there, Tom. If
Right.
they're making any cuts, your ass is out the door before
Yeah,
me.
Anne's got a decent amount of job security,
Right.
if only for the lack of two N's in the name.
Right. I
In
mean,
the
just
first.
that alone.
But so BuzzFeed votes to unionize after layoffs. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but the fact that they're undergoing these massive layoffs shows that they don't have a whole lot of leverage. These
Yeah, but
workers,
mm, yeah.
workers being a pretty strong term for making listicles and nonsense articles uh, that never about the president that always are debunked the following day, be it the dossier or that recent one about gosh, what even was the story about Trump and Russia, blah 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 blah. but it turned out to be entirely made up a day later. So now they've had layoffs, and now the remaining voters, the remaining workers vote to unionize, but like they're completely irrelevant. So why wouldn't they just shut down the whole company? Like, what do they think is going to happen? These people don't have special skills. They're not Liam Neeson, in Taken.
Speaking of which, maybe we have to touch on Liam.
We might have to touch on Liam Neeson.
Oh, after that name drop, how do we not talk about that poor son of a bitch now?
Astonishing, yeah.
And the fact that, and we're talking about the news and how this is all wrapped up together, the fact that at one point in that stupid asshole's friggin' admission, he's like, I can't believe I'm saying this to a journalist. It's just like, yeah, you idiot. Don't be doing that. You moron. What the fuck? They don't have TVs in Ireland? Yeah. What is going on here?
Although it does make me wonder, was Liam Neeson in Chicago 3 weeks back at 2 a.m?
Oh, man. You know what? You're piecing it all together. They could use a nice investigative journalist.
We might have cracked that case. But yeah, so the insane thing about Liam Neeson in this comment, let's see if I can just bring it up.
Well, not to get too derailed. I really hope to get back to him. But I would say to get back to Jussie for a moment. I think some of the things that just stood out amongst most people, and that's the thing I want to point out. Most people, I mean, I've heard so much outcry from the African American community. Although I feel weird seeing the African American community because they're not like, they're not all like in a network together. I have heard an outcry on the internet from many African Americans who are not MAGA by any stretch or anything like that. Like, there's no reason for them to defend this. And some of the points that they're just making are the most common sense, like, hey, man, this doesn't add up. I think one of the things that I heard that was very enlightening was from a former member of the industry, the entertainment industry. And he said, if you got into a scrap or if something happened that you need to cover your ass because you were part of some sort of deal or a show or, a record label, you would have to lie about it and they would cover for you. He goes, he is a gay man. And
so do we want to really quickly recap?
Yeah, go right ahead. Go right ahead.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, if you guys don't know, it's like this dude, he was on Empire. His name's Jussie Smollett. Jussie, of course, because he's a Hollywood actor. He can't have a regular name. He has to like take a regular name like Jesse and then just switch the vowels around to make it obnoxious. That's what they
just
do.
French it up a bit.
Yeah. I know that because I've lived in Hollywood and I've even done some acting, and these people are insufferable. So Jussie Smollett was a guy on a show, happens to be a gay actor who on the show Empire. He was in Chicago, and
he's also an African American, which I hate to have
also
to point out.
To be, a black fellow. So he was in Chicago. He alleged was attacked by guys wearing masks, and it was so weird when the story was released because it was released piecemeal, and every piece just felt there was something weird about it, and the story kept shifting. So after like 12 hours and a statement from, I believe, Jussie's manager, it was his agent or his manager, the story shifted so that it was a hate crime attack, and they wrapped a noose around him, and they were saying this is MAGA country while they were beating him. So a few things to point
and
out.
also may have poured a
Yeah.
liquid on him.
And they poured bleach on him.
Yeah,
Now,
liquid. They're not sure if it was bleach.
Okay,
They did
okay,
find
got it.
bleach in the area, so they're trying to
Uh-huh.
piece that together.
Well, they said that they attacked him with chemicals. Now, the weird thing is, a lot of things like
They attacked him with chemicals. What
right.
the fuck is
And
happening?
this was like an immediately a big story in the way that stories become big these days, where it's like you're like, why is this story everywhere at the exact same time? Like that stupid Covington thing, which Dave Smith, of Part of the Problem, I was listening to him talk about it, and he said, he's like, this is not a story. This was just a fun field trip. Like, you know, that is not a story.
Yeah, this is a trip to DC, kids, ladies and gentlemen. This is what happens when you go to DC.
A bunch of kids went to the big city and they got into a yelling match with some different ethnicities. Like, that is not a story. But this story, I mean, it involved a not celebrity, but a guy on TV. And
he seems to think he's a celebrity.
Yes, he thinks,
which is why I think this is such. I think that's why, of all the reasons people are saying, I think this altercation, that as it's portrayed by the victim, is bullshit, is because I think one of those reasons that sticks out to me is he said that they identified him as the actor in the show and knew that he was gay, and
right.
I mean, not for anything, but for guys that happen to carry a noose with them, as well as sport their MAGA hats in, of all cities, Chicago, which neighborhood residents describe the neighborhood as very black and very gay, by the way.
Right.
And if that's the neighborhood you're hanging out looking for a hate crime, by the way, let's just say this really happened as it is. Could you imagine being a racist with a MAGA hat on, going like, man, we came to the blackest, gayest neighborhood we could find,
right.
And lo and behold, guess who shows up in your path? Dude, it's the guy from Empire. Now, never mind the fact that that's complete nonsense of a situation. But also, let's examine the fact that if this also was true, and it wasn't specifically targeted, they just so happened to find this man and go, oh my God, it's the guy from Empire. What the fuck are two rednecks watching Empire for? Like, they're so in tune to, like, that's also the actor
right.
It happens to be gay in real life. Like, lucky us, man. Christmas came early. I know we just got through the holiday season. Praise Jesus! But
we literally just bought the noose. You know,
right? Do you have the noose with you, dude? I always take Harriet with me. This is great.
So
fucking terrible to really to ask people to believe that nonsense.
Well,
and
the thing that
is bullshit. The timeline is crazy.
The timeline's crazy. The fact that it was like 2 a.m. on one of the coldest days in Chicago history, like they're in a historic freeze, and guys are going around fighting. And first of all, perhaps most pertinent, Chicago could not be further from any place that you would call MAGA country. It's probably the least. It's one of the most like liberal, progressive, Democrat stronghold cities in the country. It's Obama country. So like, I think we might have mentioned that before, but it's like, how delusional. Like, these must be some very lonely racists,
Or this is the story of truly a someone who is so self-aggrandizing.
Yeah.
Like, this is the lie of someone who thinks so highly of himself. It's like, well, of course, even racists know who I am. Even racists watch my show. I mean, albeit they probably hate it, but everyone watches my show. And on top of that, everyone can identify me all bundled up on a historically cold day in Chicago. It's not a historic cold day in Mobile. I mean, these assholes are in fucking Chicago. all bundled up. Now, he gets mugged or he gets jumped. He then walks to his apartment, and after 40 minutes after the altercation, calls his manager. Then his manager says, I think you should call the cops. He calls the cops. The cops arrive at his apartment, from what I understand, and he's still wearing the noose.
Yes.
Let that sink in for a half a second.
And
if you're an African American and you were assaulted by two white racists, the last thing you should be saying to yourself is like, well, I don't want to, alter the evidence in any way. Yeah, if that's the case, brother, I hate to say this, you really should have called them like right the fuck away. That means you had the noose on and was like, oh, I guess I'm going home now. And just walked home with the noose around your neck. Came home, said, look, I know I should call the cops first because this is super humiliating and kind of weird. But you know what? I'm just going to touch base with my manager real quick just to let him know how things are going and see his advice. Let him counsel me on what I should do, right? He's like, dude, call the fucking cops. Call the cops. The cops arrive and they go, dude, you had that around your neck for like 3 hours? Like, what the fuck is happening? Like, what's going on? From what I understand, there's 12 officers on this case in Chicago, okay, right? Where like the murder rate is fucking ridiculous. That's enough for you to say if this was a false filed false report. I mean, this guy should get more than a little slap on the wrist. He should be fined heavily.
Well, from what I understand, if this turns out to be, if this starts looking false, they will charge him with creating a false report, and that will be interesting to see. What that'll mean for his career. I don't think it'll mean that much in Hollywood because at this point, when they just hear something that they don't like or don't want to believe, they just choose not to believe it. That's what they do now. So, because they built a really strong narrative, and they just refuse to disbelieve any of it. I mean, like I live in the area, and a perfect example is the other big story this week thus far. I mean, there's always a million things lately, but so I did want to touch on this. Probably not too long because I find it to be kind of obnoxious. But this whole stupid Mueller thing, it supposedly is going to finally start coming to an end. And it looks as if it will end with nothing. But you wouldn't know that to talk to anyone out here in Southern California. Everyone just assumes that it's all true. They pretend it's true. They make jokes about it as if it's true. But it just doesn't seem to be true. And if it is, then it hasn't been remotely verified over about 2 years' time. So, I couldn't agree more when they say, right here, knock it off and get it done. It's like, this is ridiculous. So, and it not from a partisan standpoint. I felt the same way when I was a kid about the whole Bill Clinton.
Exactly.
It was just utterly absurd where they're clearly trying to entrap him with some bizarre, stupid statements and, corruption that was just not really something that should be a major matter that's taking up millions, if not billions of dollars of taxpayer resources. So that's what's happening here to, I would say, an even larger extent with even less to go off of. So yeah, I mean, I hate it. I hate anything that's like a kangaroo court nonsense, which is, clearly what this is.
Yeah, and I feel like the sad part is, like you said, it doesn't even matter. Like, it just, they just get, the far left has gotten so tired of screaming racist and war criminal and all that shit. that they don't even have to worry about what the Mueller report says or
Hmm.
anything. He's just guilty. Like
Yeah.
that's all that I mean, it's just there's
Right.
no objective sort of I don't know. They can't bring themselves to be like, well, we'll see what the report says. I mean, even when it
Well,
comes out and they're
it's
gonna
become a litmus test. Hmm.
that's an interesting way of putting it because obviously when it says nothing happened,
Hmm.
the litmus test will be so either we still flat out call him the next Hitler, and that means you're a true believer,
Hmm.
or you're out. You know, like
Exactly.
you're on the outside looking in at this point in time.
Exactly right. And I don't know if they've always operated that way on, the Democratic Party or whatever, but they definitely do now. And I don't, at the moment, I don't see that as much on the other side as of now, but like you can see it very clearly in the State of the Union where like Pelosi had those people on lock, wearing just in lockstep, wearing the same clothes, standing at the same time, sitting at the same time, booing at the same time. And anytime you could watch some of these videos are really shocking of when someone cheers too loudly, they'll get like these stern looks. And it's just, there's this obsession with uniformity over there that is just it's just creepy. And, it's just creepy and collectivist, and it's everything that they've been
It's everything you're
smeared
taught
as.
to like. It's everything you're taught to like observe as red flags. When I was in, high school, learning about I don't know, communist or fascist regimes. It's like
Hmm.
these are the danger signs when people start dressing alike and
Yeah.
start fucking, you know, checking each other to make sure they're all on the same page and any dissenting voices will be weeded out. Those are
Hmm.
bad things. Those are bad things. And here's the Democratic Party like, hold my beer, watch this happen. We can make it happen here in America, you know? We can
Hmm.
see how far the
Well,
rabbit
as far as I'm concerned, like, yeah, it's not. It's just not about uh, partisanship anymore. It's just about there's clearly insane people in government right now that have been emboldened and radicalized. And it sounds crazy to say it, it sounds extreme, but like I was listening to Dave Smith just the other day and he was talking about this Green New Deal, and he was right there. He's not an extreme guy, he's a pretty run of the mill libertarian, and he's like, this is communism. Like, this would destroy America if
would destroy
implemented.
America. I've never heard him say anything like at that level so
Right.
confidently, and it was really
And
eye opening because that's how you do it first. You make it an economic policy,
yeah.
and then everything else
Right.
opens up. But this would, like you said, destroy America.
Hmm.
Very true.
And it's like, say what you will, like he made the point, you know George Hillary Clinton destroyed Libya largely, but this is the first time you've seen American legislators in modern day trying to implement policies that would destroy their own country. And it's like seeing what six Congress people sign on to this is insane. It's insane. So, um, yeah, it's a very extreme time. So it's like I'm getting to a point where it's like I can't not acknowledge the absurdity, or it's like I really am tired of like walking it back and being like, well, there's two sides and blah blah blah. It's not like it has to be sane, moderate Democrats and Republicans need to get together and say no, like really draw a firm line against this nonsense. That
Well,
and
I mean,
the identity stuff. Yeah.
what a better way to do that than the president of the United States hitting the podium and going, "America will never be a socialist country."
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
Yeah.
what
I
a
mean,
better way to do that. Honestly, even if you had a libertarian as a president, I don't think he would be as forthcoming as that. And that's the thing
that's
about
true.
Trump, that it's like, look, I am a objective critic of the president. I would like to think I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just say flat out, I don't think I could. It would have to be a non-politician, someone like Trump, that would be able to just say that. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you were saying, hey, I'm tired of walking this back, and say, look, they have a point here, blah blah blah. That's very diplomatic of you. It's very well politically conscious, but
Mm-hmm.
Trump is not really that. So if he's
Right.
so he'll just be like, America will never be a socialist country. We were born free, and we're gonna stay free. And it's like, holy shit, dude!
I mean,
Like, someone
it's
had
an
to say it.
incredible line.
I'm glad someone said it.
Yeah. I mean, at this point, it's like it's hard to not at least be somewhat supportive in the face of stuff like this. I mean, you have to have people who are gonna against this nonsense. So, I don't know. It's a strange place to be in, but it's very important, I think, to continuously call it out. And I think about it sometimes, like here we are making another, yet another YouTube and minds.com. Follow us on Minds. Podcast, if you want to call it that, stream that's like criticizing the left, blah blah blah. I get it. It gets old. You've got your Rubin report. You even got your Tim Pools and all the many right wing guys too. But it's like it's still really hard for people to speak out. Everyone still feels afraid to call this stuff out. You know it. I know it. Everyone knows it. So it's like,
Dan, my avatar is a fucking dog. Like, I can't show my face. Like, I
right.
get it. And I would also point out that, I mean, all those people that you had mentioned have, hundreds of thousands of followers. And it's like a wonderful thing that people can turn to these people. But I would like to think that the reason we're doing this is because we're just two normal people that are involved in comedy specifically on either coast. And we don't necessarily have like a political platform where we're doing speaking tours and all this shit. That's not really, where our forte lies. It's just a proof, though, that if you have to say something, and that's all we're doing here. We're just saying something. We're speaking normally the way people used to, openly and freely. Like, people used to have these conversations all the time. You'd be waiting in line for, great adventure. You're about to hit a roller coaster, and people would just be bullshitting, just like, man, Jesus Christ, do you think the president would get a pass just for getting a blowjob in the White House? Ha ha ha. And no one would say or do anything. There wouldn't be like, oh, you fucking racist piece of shit. Like, I mean, no one would be like screaming shit at you. It just the level of political sensitivity and how hyper aware people are of race and all this stuff is made conversations totally impossible. So all we're doing is just adding our voices to the bucket. And hopefully, instead of saying, I wish we had 10,000 followers or 100,000 followers, I wish there's 100,000 people taking to YouTube and speaking out. That's what I hope.
It's amazing because everyone has this capability now to speak out and to like get their voice out, and people don't do it. People are more frightened than ever to say anything, which I'll say real quick while we're on the subject of, I don't know if we ever talked about the name of our stream and Kabarett or Kabarett and where it comes from. This is the idea, a Kabarett, it came from it's a French or German Well, Kabarett, from started in 1901, part of Berlin's Brett venue in Austria. So, point being, it was a place where people can say humorous things and, I guess, challenging things in a setting that was open and at a time when it was very dangerous to say those things, which was the early 20th century.
Yeah,
So,
the Weimar era here, it says characterized by political satire and gall humor.
mm-hmm.
That's pretty accurate. I like that.
So that was a time when people found it really difficult to talk, and you know it's no at this point it's become a rather rote to say that that's true now, but it doesn't make it less true just because it's cliche. So you know that's what we're trying to do here. That's what this is all about, and thus we talk about things that make people a little uncomfortable still. Um, and hopefully we can, you know, I don't know, do something good with it.
Couldn't agree more.
Good. Uh-huh.
Yeah. I hope we can just inspire people to, just lend your voice out there. It is difficult and there are repercussions. Lord knows, I'm a fucking dog here. So, because I can't be a
It's
person,
true.
and uh, I, I, I just think that at the end of the day, we can discuss things as openly and freely as possible. That's where this comes from. I have an inability to do that in public without, fearing for, massive repercussions socially, economically, even physically in certain regards. So I want to be able to speak my mind. I want to be able to have a conversation with a person who is able to bounce ideas back and forth and take whatever arguments I'm giving with good faith. And it's a luxury to be able to do this now. It's a luxury.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I said earlier, we're on minds.com, which is important to know because obviously things are pretty dicey on YouTube. And so find us on Minds. And I will say we're seem to be getting more views on Minds already than on YouTube. Let's be honest, we're a little late to the YouTube space. But here we are. Why don't we start wrapping things up a little bit?
Sounds good.
Yeah, we'll see what happens with this Jussie Smollett character. It'll be really interesting to see whether this ends up hurting him or not. I mean, it's Hollywood is going to rally around him. That's definitely true because they have no other choice. It's just the way that it operates a lot like the mafia. You know, everyone just gets on board, and if you don't, you're in trouble. You know, that you don't get work. It's called corruption. But so that's how that's going to happen. Liam Neeson is an odd duck, an odd fellow, strange man who does also prove, you know, that these issues, like racial issues, do exist. Ironically enough, these two stories kind of hit both sides there. But at the same time,
I will say, hearing what Liam said, I think it's a great thing to say to a friend in confidence, especially if you know they come from like a different, perspective, where maybe they're very, again, hyper aware and hypersensitive to these sorts of issues, and be like, look, I get it. I've held these dark, beliefs, and I've come to the edge of doing some terrible things. And you know what? I had my moment where I said, what the fuck am I doing? And holy shit, I can't believe I even came that close to hurting someone. but to, as a human being, to not hear his story and say, yeah, I've been, full of rage and I wanted revenge.
Mm-hmm.
A
Mm-hmm.
friend of his, his girlfriend
Well,
was raped, and
right.
or
Anyone
as one of
who's
his, yeah.
this is sort of thing that it's frustrating because it's like there's definitely something where if he had worded that in a way that wasn't quite as like clearly absurd and legitimately racist, uh, he was made like there's a point in there that is when horrific violence occurs to someone that you care about, the desire for irrational revenge exists
I mean, the
in
left of
any
all people would know that. I mean, they're the ones that are
right.
like, we don't we don't need, proof. We'll just punish anyone who's accused of certain things
That's
like
right.
this. So, clearly they would like this. They can't understand where this guy is coming from, and
That's
it's
true. They say that
clearly
it's yeah, that's right. It's people on the left who will say, that it's okay if an innocent guy goes to jail or gets expelled if it means that we get to punish some guy who committed, some sort of you know assault on campuses. So it's like they obviously understand that irrational retribution is desired by human beings. It's not right, it's not right to even fantasize about murdering people, but it's like,
is it human? I think
is
it.
it
I
human?
think
Of
it
course
is.
it is. Yeah. So I don't know. Like I've always found like racism to be absurd and like just silly. The obsession with it on both sides is quite silly. Um,
I
but
mean, not for anything. I thought Republicans were quite happy to move on from this sort of thing, and
yeah,
it's like the left had to just find their. It's almost like getting back together with an old girlfriend. That was
mhm.
crazy. They're like, "Hey, remember this can of worms?
Right.
Let's get
I-
involved with this all over again." Man, you know what? I miss the 50s and 60s. Talk about wanting to go back to the past. These
yeah,
are fanning old flames, man. Old flames.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's the irony though. These days, it is definitely the left that's trying to bring back, and the Democrats specifically, that's trying to like bring back quote unquote the good old days or the bad old days, I guess, in their minds. But like they're still trying to like resuscitate that corpse, and it's like, uh, you know, everyone else is like, let's move on. So it's just ironic, obviously, because that's what you generally say about conservatives, but I don't know. We're living in a weird time. So, yeah, I don't know what to say about the Mueller thing. The sooner that is done, the better.
Yeah.
It's a blight on the nation. Anytime you see endless investigations with very scant evidence, that's the sign of of kangaroo courts of out of control bureaucracies. So not good, not good things. But that's it. I think that's about it for this week. For at least for today, we might be back later this week.
For sure.
Yeah. So thank you for being with us today. I'm Dan Banis. With me is Good Boy.
Have a good night, everyone.
Good night. Arf, arf.